Hey everybody, welcome back to Wrote Reviews. I'm Baz Collins here with my co-host Vance Bastian, and today we are reviewing The Old Guard. Now, this was a movie that came out last year, but as Vance and I are ramping up with the reviews, we're revisiting some of the ones that we missed doing a review of last year when they occurred. But so we're kind of catching up. But this one was suggested by Vance that we do this week. So because he's the big gamer and the big comic book geek of us as a duo, I love comics, but I'm not as totally like fanboying over every issue that gets released. Anyways, The Old Guard is a story about a covert team of immortal mercenaries is suddenly exposed and must now fight to keep their identity a secret, just as an unexpected new member is discovered. And it's based off of a graphic novel by Greg Rucka, I believe, right? Yeah. And so it's a phenomenal story because it plays on people's concepts of mythos, general mythology around the world, and so I just before we get into it, I want to just say that I applaud Netflix again for providing another story where queer characters are just there. There's no big hoopla about it. In fact, it's revealed as you get into the story. It's not here's the pride flag coming through, now we have the queer characters. It's like an onion skinning. That revelation of these queer characters in the story comes with the onion skinning of the story as you get deeper into the story. And I really, really applaud Netflix for providing yet another story where that happens, where they have agency, that their queerness is. It's not a main. They're not preaching on the mountain, So, what did you think of the film?
I loved it. Short answer.
And we're done. Scene.
All right, I loved it for a lot of reasons. First,
let's put I have a clapboard. I should bring a clapboard when we're done. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, you forgot to do that when we started, by the way.
All right.
Anyway, let me give the warnings first. They are a team of mercenaries, and there's no real holding back of the violence. However, unlike some of the other stuff we've reviewed, the violence isn't the focus. And maybe that's just because it's an action film that you're much more interested in watching the heroes fly through the air with their really cool acrobatic stunts and a little less focused on the blood. But they don't shy away from it. And these are immortals who can take 17, 18, 25,000 bullets and stand up.
Right.
So
it hurts.
It hurts.
It hurts. They don't get relief from the pain.
Right.
That would be kind of a pain in the ass, really, if you were one of them. It's like, do I want
and they
mortality?
don't get to bounce. They don't get to bounce the bullets. They heal after the fact. Yeah. So just to warn you, if violence and blood turn your stomach, this is not the film for you. If you're okay with it, watch it. Just go watch
it's
it.
really funny too. They didn't, as you say, they didn't go overboard with the violence display, and by that I mean if you compare it to like Spartacus, where the blood, because it's like 300, the blood flies as a, and you see it in slow motion.
A film
it's
like
not
that,
glorified. No,
a film like that, I say the blood is one of the characters.
Right. Well, yeah, but I mean, in this one, you have that violence. So if people have seen 300 and Spartacus, they've seen things like that, it's not quite that level of violence.
It's not.
I think there's only a couple of times that you see a blood splatter thing going on, so it's not really the be-all, end-all of it. It's really more, you're really more absorbed in what the characters are going through and what their end goal is. So I really loved it too. I liked the premise of you didn't know everything about them. Like I said, it was onion skinned. You had to it's a kind of a thinking man's action or thinking woman's action film where you don't get given all the information. When the new immortal arrives on the scene, she's kind of your foray into learning their lore but that happens a little further in the movie.
Mm.
So I liked that as a viewer. I love smart films. I love films that don't tell you everything,
Hmm.
that you have to start drawing conclusions and putting your imaginary red lines with the pins to say, oh, this is related to that, and so on and so forth. I
Yeah.
liked that there was. What did you have something there?
I was gonna say the other thing that I really like is I like a film that takes our history, and I'm gonna use history loosely because we're talking about mythology here, and says, hmm, maybe this is where that legend came from. Look at these characters.
Right, right, and even you hear Charlize Theron's character say, "I was worshipped as a god,"
Hmm.
and it kind of gives the context of theocracy as a mythos,
Hmm.
one of many, and so even when um, the new character comes in, the new immortal, and
Yeah.
she's a Christian and she's praying, and you hear Charlize Theron's character turn to her and say, "Oh, you're doing that? You're really going to do that now?" That doesn't matter. That's not. And it's really interesting as a character who was at one time worshipped as a god,
Hmm.
um, has become so uh, disillusioned with any kind of deity situation, having been one. You know, I found that really interesting that it explored even that perspective
Hmm.
amongst their journey, because it's part of the mythos of all these characters that are brought together. And if you find out that she was the oldest, or one of the oldest, and she was revered in that way, it makes you wonder the other backstories of these other characters when they came into it. How did it happen and why? And they don't really
Well,
reveal
you get
that.
you get Nikki and Joe's.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
they
you
try
get Nikki and Joe's, yes,
they try to
but
kill
even
each other
then,
multiple times.
yeah, but even then, you don't get like what I'm trying to get at is that what the other characters, Booker, Nikki, Joe, you don't really get as much of an inference of their full history
Mm, good point.
as you do with what is her
Andy.
name? Huh?
Andy.
Andy. Yeah, Andy. Charlize Theron's
Ramaki.
character. Yeah. So that part of it was really cool. I liked the whole setup premise where they think they're doing some good, and that's really the thrust of what it is. They're not good or bad in and of themselves, but they try to figure out in any given difficult situation, if they become engaged, they do what they think is right.
Hmm.
And so some people will think those are bad things they do. Some people will think they're good things they do. But one person in this movie actually tracks all of the stuff that they've been doing, and it gets revealed at a certain point. Spoiler alert! That they show that throughout history, they've been there at certain times to save certain individuals in harsh situations that allowed them to survive and thrive, and then they go on to do some great good for humanity.
Yep.
So while the story kind of goes along the fact that, oh, we've discovered these immortals and we're going to guinea pig them until, and rat lab them until we figure out how to take their gifts and give them to everybody else, um, it's really more of a, you begin to understand the greater good when you really look at when you get to the end and you get to see the full scope. You see that they're here for a purpose. They don't even know really what the purpose is, but
Hmm.
they've been pivotal at each one of these instances throughout history and throughout time to be there to save the one who will make an impact on the world. That's kind of their calling, and that's what you get from it.
Or save the parent of the one who will make an impact on the
Right.
world.
Yeah, exactly. There's somehow something happens later in life for that individual that they saved that does some kind of good for humanity. And I thought that was a really interesting aspect of it too. It's a lot easier and probably more lazy to just have the heroes, the immortals in this case, do everything,
Hmm.
but that really wasn't their calling. They're there to defend the righteous, really, is what it boils down to. Those that will do the proper things for humanity.
Mhm.
Even if they don't know that's what's going to happen with them later.
So what's your problem with
My problem with it is I from the first time Henry Melling shows up, and Henry Melling is the actor who played Dudley Dursley in Harry Potter movies. He's much thinner now, but it was interesting because when I first saw him on screen, I was like, "That Dudley?
it?
Dudley's lost weight. Dudley, there's skinny Dudley again." I just couldn't, every time he showed up. And it's not a knock against him as an actor.
Nope.
It was just,
He's
there's
so
Dudley.
so recognizable. It's hard
Yeah.
to pull him out of his
Yeah,
original
it's just,
role.
no, exactly. I mean, I struggle with that whenever I see Daniel Radcliffe or I see Emma Watson. I go, oh, there's Hermione. Oh, she's doing this now. Okay. Yeah, it is. It's a very weird scenario, and it's not a knock on them as a performer.
No.
It's so.
So what
Go ahead.
what's interesting about that though is we only have that about those actors because we saw them essentially in the same franchise over 9 films, technically 8 books, 9 films. Because you don't have that feeling with Charlize Theron. You didn't look at her and see a wicked queen.
Right, right, right. You've seen, and I think it's probably because they had varied their careers doing different roles, and so you've kind of just let it be. But when a Harry Potter character shows up, aside from Maggie Smith and all of the adult actors who have been in other things, these kids grew up in those roles for over 9 years.
I don't know. My husband still wanted to see Maggie Smith cast a spell in Downton Abbey. He did.
That's cousin Violet.
Every
That
episode,
Kane's got to do something.
every episode, he's like, she's gonna animate those statues. I just know it.
She's gonna pull out her wand from her cane.
So my only problem kind of veers into spoiler territory, so I will do my best to avoid the spoileriest part. I absolutely loathe storylines when somebody trusted is the ultimate betrayer. Now,
Yeah.
the character Baz was just talking about, you know from the beginning that he wants to capture these immortals and use their genetics to try to sell immortality to humanity to further his own wealth. That's not a problem. But somebody very, 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 very close to these characters is the ultimate betrayer who gets them caught by him. And I hate those storylines. I just loathe them. I know they've got a punch, and I know there's a reason for them.
And yeah, but it is an old trope. It is something that they could have done something else. Like maybe, he was tricked into it.
Right.
But they didn't. They just sat on the old trope.
Or
Yeah.
Chiwetel's character, who from the beginning is the one who kind of sets up the capture, could have been the one to have done this because he would have been okay. As he was smart enough to figure out who they were, he was smart enough to figure out that they were different, and he was smart enough to set up the capture.
Right.
We didn't need a betrayer. He could have been the smart one to do that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I get it. I get it. Yeah. Now that you say that, yeah, I felt sucker punched when that situation arises. I'm like, ugh. I do remember thinking I could have done better with that.
Yeah.
Which is why I also have I've knocked the script writing down a notch from a 5 because I think some of the writing was a little lazy. And I for all of Henry Melling's, he was Lex Luthor. He was, it just was a 2-dimensional, I'm a villain character out for money and at all costs. And, it was a little too stark black.
So let's give our ratings.
Yes, let's. So overall, I say it's a 5.
I also 5 for production.
Okay. And then for the script writing, like I said, I knocked it down to 4 because of some of the lazier aspects of not becoming a little more. And yeah, I understand it's based on a graphic novel, but that's when you have a chance to fix something.
Right. Right.
When you take it to another medium, because it is adapted from. So.
Right. And I actually originally gave that a 3 for the tropey reason, but I bumped it up to a 4 because I'm like, okay, they are trying to bring out the graphic novel feel.
Yes. And I did love that they brought in the immortal that they talk about that
yeah,
you
she's
get you get that at the end.
she's
she
the
makes it
teaser for the second film.
Yes, yes. So that there's a setup in this movie. It's not quite a cliffhanger, but there's a
No.
setup in this movie that makes you go, hmm. You know? So for the sound, lighting, and score, I thought it was well done. None of that took me out of the action of the film or the development of the characters, so I thought that was a 5. Art direction, I thought was a 5. Go
I
ahead.
say some lighting score. I gave it a 5 because the song that they played for the closing credits is now in my workout list. Outlaw by Elle King. Listen to it.
Okay. Okay. Um, and the art direction I gave a 5. I thought it was well done, on par with most action films. You
Yep.
know,
Same here.
so casting 4 only because Henry Melling just was two dimensional, and that's not really his fault. That's the way the character was drawn. But I think that he could have nuanced it a bit better, and it was just jarring to have him in that role. I could not just put it down, and that was that. And that may be on me, not necessarily on him, but it was something I had to struggle with in the movie. Oh, Skinny Dudley. Oh, Skinny Dudley's back. Why is Skinny Dudley holding that axe?
Right. I actually gave casting a 5 because they weren't really they did a good job of being diverse.
Yes, they did do that.
Black actors, white actors. The strongest
Middle Eastern.
The strongest character was a woman. The new Immortal's best friend was Latina.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, full credits to the casting on that one.
Yeah, yeah. And then direction, I gave a 5. I really liked the way it was directed and handled.
Me too.
It's one of those things that when a director is best is when you don't feel like it's being directed in any one way. And I think this was handled very well. And it was directed by a woman, so bravo, Gina. And queer themes presented, a 5, because as I said in the beginning, you just find out that Nikki and Joe are a couple, and their expression for their love is not metered. It's not watered down in any way. They go for broke. They explain the level of love that these two characters feel for each other, and I think that is one of the best parts of this whole movie, is that they have a backstory. You get revealed about their relationship, but that it goes much deeper. You begin to really understand the level of what they feel for each other, and it just is. It just is.
Yep. I also gave it a 5, and
Okay.
I was highly amused that the most stable relationship was the gay characters.
Yeah. The two that had it most together.
Yep.
I do love one spoiler line. I do love when Joe gets to say, "You shot my husband. You shouldn't have done that." Best line in the whole thing.
That was awesome.
Although I will say what had happened when Nikki actually got shot and he got up. I wanted him so desperately to go, "Oh God, I'm gonna have to wash this out." I wanted something there, comedic wise, some relief. So my personal overall is a 4.5.
Mine is a 5. I would watch it again. As a matter of fact, I have watched it twice, and for as new as that is, that's saying something. And I will probably make
some man that doesn't have a lot of time on his hands. So if he took the time out to watch it twice, that's saying something.
And before the second one hits, I will make my husband sit down and watch it again.
So that's our reviews. We will also post the Rotten Tomatoes and the IMDb scores along with our scores, so you get a rounded review of this movie. But we highly recommend it. If you haven't watched it, and you have to be under a rock not to have watched it, but if you haven't, or if you've been on the fence about it, we've given the trigger warnings. We've told you a little bit about what it's about. It is a romp of a film. It's a good popcorn movie. It's a great popcorn
really is.
movie. So that's kind of what I'll say as my final summation. Definitely should check it out. I don't think it. Well, I mean, it depends on if you're the type of family where kids watch some action movies, but I don't think there's anything presented beyond the scope of action movies that is I mean, a lot of families, violence is not a big issue. oddly enough, you know,
Right.
but two guys kissing, whoo, we got a problem, you know. So there's that, you know. So that's another thing to consider. So if you have little ones around, you might want to watch it first yourself before you decide whether or not the kids can see it. All right.
Yep.
So thanks for stopping by and watching our review of The Old Guard. We're looking forward to the next one. And what are we doing next week?
Folks, you missed one hell of a sidebar.
Yeah, it was at least 40 minutes long while we figured out what we were watching next. Anyways, we've decided we are going to watch a pair up of cinema history with queer representation. We're watching The Celluloid Closet and Color Me Lavender. Two really good documentaries that take a look at queer representation and queer theory in the media, mostly in just TV movies. And it's really a great exploration. I've had some gay friends who have never seen them and had them watch it, and they had that whole opinion of beforehand, why, you know, when people would say, why is everything turning gay? After you watch these movies, you really understand it's been there all along. You just didn't know it. So it's one of those, and I've had people whose minds were changed after they watched it. They go, oh, okay, so it was there. I just didn't see it. Didn't understand that's what it was. So, you know, it is a great pair of exploration into queer theory in, you know, and I say that, and I'm worried that all the Republican senators are going to start talking about queer theory as a major problem. So I probably put that out in the universe. Sorry, guys, but it is an exploration of queer theory in the history of film, starting back from, you know, all the way back to Edison's picture of the two dancing men back in the silent era when things first got started. So it's a really interesting walk through cinema, just from a cinema standpoint, but then when you hear all these actors, directors, screenwriters talk about the projects, it really puts a complete different spin on it. And it is the life work of Vito Russo, who was a gay man who was a media historian. We lost him to the AIDS crisis in the 90s, but his body of work is unparalleled. It's truly a masterful collection of, and I'm so glad they made it into a film. I don't know if he got to see it. I think he may have passed away before it was released, but it is a great collection of movie history. So even if you're just into movie history, you will really probably like these two documentaries. So we'll look at those next week, and until then, we will see you at the movie. So take care, and we'll talk soon.
Bye, everybody.